You got the thing. The job, the relationship, the milestone you used to lie awake thinking about. For a moment, it felt incredible. And then, almost immediately, a quiet thought arrived. Okay, what's next? Not, I made it. Not, I can finally relax. Just, what's next? You look around. Somehow, despite achieving something you once wanted desperately, you still feel like you're behind. Behind on what, exactly? You couldn't say. But the feeling is unmistakable, and it doesn't seem to care how much you've actually done. The real answer is far stranger than you're just ambitious or you have high standards. It has to do with the fact that your brain was never built to register enough. Not because something is wrong with you, but because, for almost all of human history, there was no such thing as enough. Start with a basic question. What is behind, exactly? Behind whom? Behind what? For that feeling to exist, your brain needs a comparison point. Some reference somewhere that represents on track, against which you can measure yourself and come up short. For most of human history, that reference point was simple. It was the people around you. Your tribe. Maybe 150 people total, for your entire life. You knew exactly how your hut compared to the next one. You knew who had more food stored for winter, who had more children, who was respected, who wasn't. The comparison set was small, stable, and visible. And critically, it was finite. There were only so many people to compare yourself to, and most of them you knew personally. Now think about your comparison set today. Anthropologist and evolutionary psychologist David Buss has written extensively about what he calls social comparison, the deeply wired tendency to evaluate your own status by looking at others. This isn't a modern habit. It's ancient. In a small group, knowing where you stood relative to everyone else was directly tied to resources, mating opportunities, and survival. But Buss's research and the broader field of evolutionary psychology points to something unsettling. This comparison mechanism doesn't have an off switch, and it doesn't have a built-in filter for scale. Your brain runs the same "how do I compare" calculation, whether you're looking at the other 150 people in your ancestral group or scrolling through a feed containing the curated highlights of millions of people, a significant fraction of whom are, statistically, exceptional outliers. This is where things get strange. When you see someone your age who's achieved something remarkable, started a company, written a book, reached some milestone you haven't, your brain doesn't automatically apply a statistical correction. It doesn't think, this person represents the 99th percentile of a global population of billions, so my comparison to them is mathematically meaningless. It just registers. There's someone in my reference group who is ahead of me. And my reference group, to your ancient social comparison circuitry, doesn't distinguish between the 150 people I actually live among and every visible human achievement on the entire planet. So your sense of where you stand is being calculated against a sample size that no human brain, at any point in evolutionary history, was ever designed to process. There's a second piece to this, and it's about what researchers call the hedonic treadmill, a term popularized by psychologists Philip Brickman and Donald Campbell in the 1970s. Their research and decades of work that followed found something consistent. When people achieve a goal, get a raise, buy the bigger house, the emotional boost is real, but it's temporary. Within a relatively short period, people's baseline happiness tends to return to roughly where it was before. This isn't because the achievement didn't matter. It's because your brain treats your current circumstances as the new normal almost immediately, and then recalibrates its sense of enough upward from there. Think about what this means evolutionarily. If your ancestors found a particularly good hunting ground and then simply felt permanently satisfied, stopped striving, stopped scanning for the next opportunity, that complacency could be dangerous. Resources fluctuate, threats emerge. A brain that says, "This is great, I can stop now," is a brain that might not notice when conditions change. So instead, Your brain is built to briefly acknowledge a win and then immediately shift its baseline, making the new achievement feel normal, almost invisible, and turning its attention back outward, toward the next gap, the next thing that isn't yet secured. This is genuinely useful if you're trying to survive in an unpredictable environment with finite resources. It's considerably less useful if you're trying to simply feel okay about your life in a world of abundance, where the next opportunity your brain is scanning for is often something it generated itself, an arbitrary comparison, an imagined milestone, a sense that everyone else is somehow further along. Now here's the part that connects everything together. Researcher Leon Festinger, who first formalized social comparison theory in the 1950s, found that people don't just compare themselves to others randomly. They tend to compare upward to people who appear to be doing better, more often than downward to people who are doing worse. There's a reasonable evolutionary logic here. Comparing yourself to someone doing worse than you doesn't give you much useful information about how to improve your situation. But comparing yourself to someone doing better might reveal a strategy, a resource, a path you hadn't considered. In a small ancestral group, doing better had a ceiling. The most successful hunter in your tribe of 150 people was still just one person, with one hut, one set of tools, one social position you could clearly see and understand. Today, doing better has no ceiling because your upward comparison set includes the most successful people on the planet, edited, curated, and presented at their absolute peak moments, with all the unglamorous middle parts removed. Your brain doesn't see, "This is an extreme outlier, irrelevant to my situation." It sees, "Someone is doing better," and quietly files that under "where I should be." So here's what's actually happening when you achieve something and immediately think, "What's next?" Your brain briefly registers the win. Then, almost instantly, three things happen at once. Your baseline recalibrates upward, making the achievement feel less significant than it did the moment before you got it. Your comparison set, unrestricted by any evolutionary limit on scale, immediately surfaces new ahead of you reference points, because in a population of billions, there is always someone further along on any axis you care to measure. And your ancient scanning circuitry, the same system that once kept your ancestors alert to changing conditions, interprets this gap as something to act on, rather than something to simply notice and let go of. None of this means your goals don't matter, or that ambition is some kind of evolutionary trap you should try to switch off. It means the specific feeling, the sense that you are behind, regardless of what you've done, isn't a measurement of your actual life. It's the output of a comparison engine running calculations it was never designed to run, against a dataset it was never designed to process, producing a number that feels like a verdict but is actually closer to noise. You got the thing, the job, the relationship, the milestone. And somewhere, almost immediately, that quiet thought arrived again. What's next? Maybe the most useful question isn't what's next. Maybe it's next, according to whom?